understanding court orders. With the video I did the other day about the Caleb Leverett story, a lot of you guys have made comments, and I've received them within the comments on the video and emails basically saying, so what's the point? You know, I have this court order right here. I got mine right here. So it's not worth the paper it's printed on? Well, I mean, yes and no. I mean, the one thing that you have to remember, and we talked about this before, is everything in the legal system takes a long time. You know, there's not anything where it happens really quick. I think that was a really big disappointment to me, and a lot of you have expressed that as well, where you started into something thinking that it was going to be relatively quick, that your case was relatively clear, and it took a lot longer than you thought. Now, violation of a court order kind of falls into that same framework, and as you remember in the video, there was a part where the police officers were basically saying, hey, this is a civil issue, it's not a criminal issue, it's out of our, you know, it's not really our responsibility, we're not really going to get involved, okay? So that can make you think that, you know, you have nothing to stand on, and that isn't real. I mean, that is absolutely not true. Now, the way you think that a court order way it's going to probably protect you, you may be a little naive on, and you may not have an accurate view on this. And we'll talk a little bit about this throughout this video, and that's really the importance, to really have a good expectation of what you're dealing with, what your expectations are of what that order really means, and what you're going to be able to do with it going forward. Okay, so like I said, court orders are very important, and it sets a very important baseline on your proceedings going forward. And as I've mentioned before, in your divorce decree and your parenting plan, you need to cover all the important issues. Everything that's really important to you needs to be in this document. If you have issues, you know, visitation issues need to be put in there. Drop off way that's going to be needs to be put in there. Communication needs to be put in there. Vacation, any issues on, you know, schooling decisions, everything. Like in my court order, it says it's all joint. It's all supposed to be coordinated. All the information is supposed to be shared. Now, we've already talked before that, you know, technically, if you want to be serious about it, my ex, by not sharing information, is in violation of a court order. And anytime I forget to send something, or if I don't send something, it's the same thing. Now, and then that goes into what we've talked about before, is like choosing your battles. But the main thing is a court order is super important as a tool when you're going forward and you're trying to resolve problems, okay? And the thing with that is, here's the problem. If you have an issue and it's not clear in the court order, and you ultimately end up in court, what will happen, and we've heard this from a lot of different people, even Alex Falcone has talked about this in his videos, where you can have an issue that seems clear, that you seem to think that you've captured in your court order, and when you finally go to court, it's vague, and the judge won't actually rule saying that there's a problem, because it isn't necessarily a violation of the court order because it didn't say it. Like, for instance, if, you know, I'm trying to think of an example, like if it says, you know, you're supposed to drop the kids off after school. Well, you know, what's the definition of after school? What's the time? So if it's, you know what I mean? So it's like, what's the expectation? You need to have clear items identified in your court order so that it's enforceable. So, as we've already said, in most cases, unfortunately, if there is a problem and you call the police, call law enforcement, more than likely you're not necessarily going to get the outcome that you really want. Like if you take and this works both ways. There's two examples. You can take the video that we did the other day with Caleb, where the police officer said, okay, well, there's a court order that says mom gets the kids, but the kid doesn't want to go. We're not going to force it, so dad, you can take the kids, okay? And so that's one thing. The next thing is, and you guys need to be super careful about this, is if the visitation says that the other parent, primarily it's a non-custodial parent because they have less time, if this order says that they get to see the kids on certain days and you basically don't facilitate that, then technically, if your ex decides to finally get irritated with it and take you to court, you could be in contempt of court and in contempt of the court order. So it works both ways. Now, the same thing. If I'm sitting here, if I had full custody of my kids and my kids were like, well, and this isn't my case. We've talked about this before, but just hypothetically, if my kids said, you know what, I don't really want to go to mommy's, it's not any fun, whatever the reason is. I want to stay with you, daddy, because I have a school event I want to do, or practice, or a game, and you'll take me and she won't, so I want to stay with you. If I was to say, okay, you're right, I won't make you go, and if it was specifically put in there that it's their time and I'm not facilitating it, that is a problem. And you can get yourself in serious trouble with that. Now, the issue is that you're going to end up having to go back to court. You're going to have to, they're either going to have to file or you're going to have to file to have the issue resolved. Now, the problem is the cost and the expense and all that stuff. Now, technically, and if you look at Caleb's story where, his son wanted to stay with him and he stayed there and the parents weren't able to work it out, more than likely what happened is that's the reason why his son was ordered to go back to him, because he wasn't following the rules and the court probably took it out on him. Now, I don't know that for sure, but there are other stories on the flip side of this where, just the example I was just using, where a custodial parent will say, I'm not going to force my kids to go someplace they don't want to go. They don't do it. They get pulled back into court and then they get slammed because, well, who's the parent? You're allowing the kids to decide to do whatever they want. You're the adult. You get to make, you're the one who's supposed to enforce it. You're the one who's supposed to follow this court order and make your child follow the court order. So the thing is, you have to remember is you can look at that video and you can look at some of the other stories that are on the internet, and we haven't necessarily talked a lot about it, but where you'll see that somebody who doesn't follow the court order seems to get away with it for a while. The problem is, if your ex violates that court order, you're probably going to have to go back to court. And although this can seem rather bleak and it can seem like, well, okay, what is even the point? Because, this isn't worth the paper it's printed on. It actually is. If you go back and you have to go to court and you're saying that, hey, judge, they're not following the visitation. The visitation is clearly set and they don't bring the kids, they keep the kids extra days. It's causing all these other problems. It's not going to bode well for the person who's not following the court order. So here's the thing. So if you're in a situation where you're having a problem and the court order isn't following or isn't helping your situation, or you're seeing that it's causing problems, you really have two fundamental options to deal with it. The first one is you just say, okay, you know what? It isn't important and I'm not going to fight it, and you let it go. And sometimes that's the right call, sometimes it's not. Or second, you basically say, you know what? This is super important. I think something's wrong, and you have to go back to court to have the document modified. You have to go back for a modification for your parenting plan or your divorce decree, or however the document is called. But that's irrelevant. But you're basically having that legal document modified. And I would highly encourage you that if you have an issue with it, and unless both of you agree, you need to go back to court and get it fixed. So the other thing to keep in mind is, and this what I will tell you as a cautionary note. Let's say hypothetically you strongly suspect that your ex has strong narcissistic personality traits, and you're worried that they're that way. You have evidence to make you feel that that's the case. If they decide to do a verbal change, unless it helps you, be very careful. So let me give you an example. So let's say in my situation, we'll use me as an example. If I have 50-50 custody. Let's say that I needed to move someplace or something happened. Let's say work was really complicated and I was able to discuss with my ex and say, you know what? For a period of time, let's switch to where you have the kids for for the week, and then I'll do every other weekend, just temporarily. And then we start doing that. Well, the problem is, if you can't trust the other person, they could then use that against you. Now, conversely, if it's the other way around, right? So let's say my ex said, hey, I want to do this, I need to do it for work, right? I'm getting a new job, and it would really, I need you to watch the kids or to have the kids for the full week, and then I'll have them every other weekend. Let's say hypothetically that's the case. Again, that would be a risk for her. Let me back up. It's a risk for her, but it's not necessarily a risk for me, right? Because I'm getting more time, if anything was to happen, it doesn't, it doesn't really complicate anything. And, it's not putting me at risk, right? Because if she comes back and says, hey, I want to go back to 50-50, I mean, I'm assuming I would say yes, but it's like I'm in the better position. If I said no, you know what, we've been doing, every other weekend for the last year and a half, and it's stable, and I don't want to, I don't want to make it harder for the kids, right? I mean, that is the thing. It puts you in a better position on that. But like I said, conversely, if you're putting yourself on the other side, it could be a problem, because whenever you go around and say, hey, okay, the situation's been resolved, let's go back to normal, they could say no. Now, technically, the court order still says that you have that time, like in this scenario I'm using. However, the problem is if we went to court, you absolutely know they're going to say, well, Your Honor, Mr. Dwayne here changed visitation, and for the last 6 months, Mrs. Dwayne has had custody, and now the kids are stable, whatever. It's going to make it more complicated because I voluntarily agreed to a change. So just be cautious on that. I hope that gives you a little bit of better understanding of court orders, and you need to understand how you use them and how they can be used. So if you're thinking that if your ex is going to do something and that's in violation or doesn't really fit the intent of the court order, if you're thinking that you're going to be able to call the police department and say, my ex is, kidnapping the kids, or is having too much time, whatever, is in violation of the court order, they are not going to, for the most part, going to go kick down the door and do something about it. So that doesn't necessarily mean it's not, you probably should still call them, make a report so you have that documentation so when you go back to court, but don't necessarily expect that they're going to grab your piece of paper and go marching in and force the issue or enforce the court order with your ex. I get it. That is not exactly what you really want to hear. That's not what any of us wants to hear. I've told you guys before when I talked about the story of the first Christmas, I played the chicken game with my ex saying, hey, you're going to violate this court order. It's been signed by everybody. If you do it, I am going to I basically threatened to call the police. And like I've told you guys, I firmly believe that had it pushed to that level, more than likely, they would have said, you know what, not our issue, take her to court. We're not going to get involved. We're not going to go put an APB out. We're not going to pull them over and arrest everybody and, take the kids. I just wanted to talk about this because I know this has caused a lot of angst in a lot of people and a lot of questions. And I thought if I just made a video talking specifically about it, it might help clear it up and give you a better idea of what your expectations are. Because I think if you didn't have the expectation and you thought something was going to happen and you're feeling stressed and you're reaching out to someone to do something and they basically say, not our problem, it's going to be more traumatic than, if you have it in your idea or in your mind's eye that may be a possibility, you can at least still call them, you can still involve them, and it won't be as emotionally devastating to you as basically thinking, well, what's the point? Why do I even have this? So if you want to add it to the conversation, do that in the comments below. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you like the channel, please subscribe. And if you haven't done so already, head on over to the Dad Surviving Divorce website at dadsurvivingdivorce.com, and there is a link to sign up for the newsletter that I send out different commentary, a lot of different things I don't normally put on the channel or on the website, and it's my way to just directly communicate with you guys, and you guys can reply back to me through that. So on that, I will chat with you guys in the next video. Take care, and yeah, see you in the next video. Bye.